Welcome to More Action, the podcast for entrepreneurs, business owners, and professionals. I'm your host, Shelly Bryan, and together we have candid conversations with industry leaders to uncover valuable wisdom and lessons learned. My hope is you use these lessons to intentionally take more action in business and life. I hope you share and enjoy. Have you ever found yourself thinking a certain way and then all of a sudden changing it? Like being like, oh no, I better not say that out loud, or I better not do that, or oh, how would that be looked at? What you're doing right there is you are taming your dark side. And I'm here to tell you in today's episode that that is something that I would suggest you wouldn't do. But you know what? Don't listen to me. I'm actually going to review this from the perspective of Tim Grover, who I will get into more based upon his book, Relentless. My name's Shelly. Welcome to the show here on More Action. You know, if you have been here before, I am very excited about sharing kind of the tips, the strategies, the good, the bad, the messy, the ugly, the wonderful of all the things that go on in business and in your career. I have a pretty wild background, but you know what? It's not just about that. It's about the lessons that we can learn and apply to our future. And no matter what, I have a significant bias towards taking action, and those that do too. So this episode today is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I just happened to pick up Tim's book again this summer. Originally, I read it. I have the book with me. If you're joining me on YouTube, I literally have the book right in front of me. Cannot recommend this book anymore. But I originally read this book when it first came out, and I'm looking right now. I should probably have looked this up when I thought it was 2012. So it was 2013. When it originally came out is when I originally read it. And then it hasn't been until this summer. So we're talking almost 12 years of experience that I gained, and then picked up the book again and reread it. And holy cow, let me tell you, it was so great to read. I couldn't put it down. I read it in one week while we were over in California on summer vacation. And it was just one of those things that I was like, oh, this is answering so many feelings that I've had that I couldn't understand. And so one of those is harnessing your dark side. And while he works with, I'll get into a little bit more about Tim, but while he works with specifically he does work with business professionals, executives, very large scale, but he has worked with some of the most elite athletes that we have ever had. And you can apply a lot of what he does with athletes to business. And this is something, especially as a woman, right? And I know that I have both male and female listeners here. I'm going to obviously give you my side of it as a woman, but it's a great perspective if you are a male leader to think about some of your females that are leveraging their dark side and how that may look. So stick around, because this is going to be a good one. And you know, here on More Action, not only am I going to dissect it, I'm going to give you tactical strategies and tips that you can use immediately, because again, it is all about taking more action. So if you haven't yet, again, I'm going to put the link to this book in these show notes. Highly, highly recommend. This is Tim's first book, and just giving a little bit more of a background on him. He has an incredible background. He came over as an immigrant at a very young age, went to school for sports therapy, came out. Everyone's like, oh, you can go work in a gym. He's like, no, I'm going to go work with elite athletes. Oh, it just happens to be that he has an incredible long-standing career with Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, some of the largest names in NBA. And he looks at what his job working with these athletes is 80% mindset, 20% on the physical. Again, you know, that's what I talk about. So much of everything that we do in business and in life, as parents, as leaders, it is tied to our mindset. And so Tim absolutely embodies that through all of his work, and now all of the additional work he is doing through his books and other avenues. But in this book, Relentless, Tim introduces the ideas or the idea of basically three types of people. Now, of course, like I said, he's talking with athletes, but he does work with business executives, owners as well. But there's really three types of people: coolers, closers, and cleaners. So coolers are those that perform well, but they don't really seek out risk. They'll follow directions and they love predictability. So they are the ones that are like the steady Eddie employees, the steady team members show up. They love their job and they do it with heart. And you've given them the instructions and the directions on how to do it. And we all need those in our business. Now, closers, they excel under pressure. And you may think like, I think of like Boiler Room. I think of like all these like fun movies where you see a lot of closers that excel under pressure. They finish tasks, right? Closers effectively, but they do need some motivation. They do need the pats on the back. They do need direction. So we have coolers, now we have closers, and then lastly, we have cleaners. Now these cleaners, they're few and far between. And they have a relentless pursuit of their goals. And it's driven by this inner force. They 100% take responsibility. They take control. They push boundaries. They do not need motivation. They don't need to go do the work that they are passionate about. They know the work that they need to do leads to a win. And what they crave is the win. And they will do whatever it takes, sacrifice whatever it takes to get to the next win. And when they get that win, it's done next. That's a cleaner. And so, Tim has obviously worked with various levels. He, in his career and as it pushed on, worked primarily with cleaners. And as you can imagine, he has learned a lot about just being able to push yourself both physically and mentally. And one of the concepts that he shares in the book, Relentless, is about understanding your dark side. And that dark side, I don't think gets talked about enough from a business perspective, because there's all this all this crazy stuff of like, oh, you can't talk about that, or you might hurt someone's feelings, or that's not HR appropriate, or all these different things. And I'm here to tell you that like rereading this book, it answered so many things from my childhood that like I never understood, or that I maybe changed about myself. And I'm going to share more in this right now. I'm going to share examples. I'm going to share, like I said, tactical advice for you to understand your dark side and how to leverage it in business. A dark side is not a bad thing. And there's other people out there like Alex Hormozy. He's very popular right now, as he should be. He's killing it in the digital game. And he talks about his dark side as well. So that dark side is it's so funny. I say dark side and immediately I think like, oh, someone's probably thinking, just like the negative side of things. And that's not it at all. Dark doesn't mean negative. Can't say that enough. But it refers to that like tapping into that raw, intense. It's that dark hidden parts of your personality that drive you to succeed. Sometimes something or thoughts that you try to hide. But what the dark side is that it's all about you embracing who you are, who your inner motivations are, using things like anger, fear, competitiveness, obsession, using that to your advantage, not shying away from it, not suppressing these feelings. And what Tim suggests is that if you harness them as a powerful fuel, you can push yourself beyond limits that you never thought were possible or reachable. You can overcome challenges. You can achieve the goal that everyone is telling you can't do. And so it's about channeling that energy, using that dark side. And again, I hope we're connected either on Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you're going to see me doing a little reading from the book because there's a couple phrases that I am going to tie in through this episode that are directly to the book because it is so powerful what Tim says, and I am not going to try to rephrase that. So the first thing I want to talk about with the dark side, he says it's the ability to voluntarily or involuntarily drop all the bullshit and inhibitions and allow yourself to do what you do, the way you want to do it, performing instinctively at the most extraordinary level. No fear, no limitation, just action and results. How often do we drop all the BS? I mean, let's be honest here. I've worked in a corporate career before. Holy cow, there was so much BS. You couldn't even get any stuff done. You couldn't foster cleaners in an organization at some of the organizations I was at. And, looking at even myself, how I've been harnessed and filtered and changed. And here's the one thing I want to tell you right now. You might be like, oh, Shelly, this doesn't pertain to me. I don't have a dark side. I'm going to tell you right now, we all have a dark side. We all have certain thoughts. We all have certain feelings. And what has happened is that we have been pushed to suppress that when the reality is it is the one of the secret weapons. And going back, like I said, reading this now 12 years later from the original time, I can see certain times in my life where I excelled at extraordinary levels is because I actually channeled and leaned into my dark side. I had no name for it. I had no theory or framework to put around it, but it was a source of strength, a focus, determination, tenacity. It was all of that. And here's the other thing is that your dark side can be like an alter ego, like Jekyll and Hyde, right? What he goes on in the book, and I'll let you guys read this. I cannot recommend this book enough, is that Michael Jordan, he had Michael, who was MJ, when he would do press conferences after, be out in the public eye, he'd be fun little MJ. Well, little, I say that laughingly. He was fun MJ, but when it got on the court, he was Michael. He was not Mike, and he would correct anybody. It was Michael, and he had one objective: to win. And that is it. And so that dark side channels the power that you have, and when you use it in that way. So what I wanted to take, now that we kind of talked about, the three types, right? Your coolers, your closers, as well as your cleaners, the dark side, identifying that, I'm going to break down some stereotypes. I'm going to talk about getting into the zone, using that dark side, and then finish it up with some practical tips so that you can harness your own dark side or learn to harness and become friends with and use your dark side. So again, I'm going to break this down as a woman, but a lot of this you can actually tie to either men or women, and specifically in business. And I've lived both sides, entrepreneur life and corporate life. Okay. So all of you ladies and even men out there, you may have said this, or even ladies, you may have said this. And I have the funniest story about all of it that I'll share at the end, a personal thing that happened to me. As we hear stereotypes of women that are maybe channeling their dark side. She's a bitch, doesn't care about anybody else, works too much, too masculine, too forward, too direct, challenging. Have you maybe said that about someone else? Have you maybe thought that about someone else? Have you thought it about yourself? Now, when we have these stereotypes out there of these people, I'll say at this point, that are super driven and going beyond and doing what others will not do in order to be successful, right? I think I read before, Kobe shot 1,000 shots a day. He didn't make 1,000. He shot 1,000 every single day. Do you know how many other NBA players do that? Very few. But he knew it's what it took to get to the win, to create the instincts, to create the muscle memory, so that he always put himself in that position. When you see someone like that, whether you're a highly paid athlete, highly paid executive, and you see someone else putting in those extra hours, doing the extra things, saying no, right? Talk about being in an organization and saying no to somebody because you have something else that is a priority. Oh, that guy's not a team player. Or that girl is not a team player, or gal or whatever is not a team player. All of these thoughts, these stereotypes is that cleaner, you think they're not team players. They get all these labels that I just mentioned, all these stereotypes. And what happens, I will say more often than not, because I'm going to speak from a woman's perspective, I cannot speak from a man. I should have had another gentleman on with me to kind of go back and forth on this, is that we as women, we start adjusting who we are to fit in to the surrounding. And I get it that there's pressure to fit in. I get it that our pay is sometimes tied to it, right? Reviews, all of these different things. You know, I was had to be trained. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm doing air quotes, trained to have a filter, because I was so driven when I went into the pharmaceutical industry. I was so driven to win. There was lots of money to go win, plus like just the pat on the back and the accolade. I wanted to win. There was like Rolex watches, big trips, cash money, all of these things. I would just push and go and go. And I had leaders changing me because I was too much. I was too direct. I worked too much, which made others look bad. I said, like I just mentioned, too direct. I had to learn how to have a filter. And I get it. Sometimes the filter is highly used, but I think when it is overutilized or influenced or pressured, you're changing who you are. And that's where you start subduing that dark side. And that is something that is a powerful tool when you harness it and own it and be who you really are. So let's talk about the dark side and the zone and kind of that alter ego. You could think about this at certain times. Maybe you were walking into a meeting. Maybe you lost a client. Maybe you just had a tough conversation. Maybe you just had a huge client win. Something happened and it pushed you into this peak state of performance and focus. For me, my favorite was having a chip on my shoulder. It was knowing that everyone else is doubting me and thinking that I can't do what I said I was going to do. Having that chip on my shoulder was my personal dark side favorite that I would lean on, and it would get me into the zone. So when I would go in on a sales meeting, literally walking into that door, I turned it on, I was in the zone. So the power of the zone is just that intense focus and performance. Now, that can be something that you have to understand. Cleaners, per Tim, cleaners are able to control their dark side. And so by doing that, they also control emotions. So you're walking into a high pressure situation. There could be fear. There could be jealousy. There could be worry. There could be excitement. There could be all of these different emotions. And I'm going to say it right now, not me. Tim Grover says emotions make you weak. And as a woman, I might be pissing some of you off hearing that right now. But think about it. I can name off, and I have on this show, when I've made emotional business decisions and they were weak and they ended up crappy 100% of the time. So emotions do make you weak. I'm going to tell you that based upon my experience. He's sharing it based upon his experience working with all of these high performing people. It's the fastest way. Understanding like the zone is a peak-in state. But in that peak-in state, you also have to control your emotions. Because if you don't, that is your fastest way out of the zone. Fear, you pull back, you put up a wall to protect, you freeze. You're launching a new product, you're launching a new business, you're hiring someone on, you're growing to new heights right now. I'm like saying it to myself, growing new heights in our construction company that we haven't been before. Hell yeah, it's a little scary. The thing that I know is that freezing, pulling back has hurt me in the past. I've learned that lesson. I lean into the fear now. I use that fear to fuel the emotion, the dark side, the zone that I want to be in. Now, all of these, Tim mentions fear, rage, and jealousy, fastest ones to take you out of the zone. He says the only exception is anger. And Tim goes on to say in the book that controlled anger is a deadly weapon. You can restrain it and turn it into energy. And I love that. Because when you think about it, anger, you bring it back, it can fuel things that thoughts, ideas, solutions that you never thought of before. So moving on now, we've talked about, right, starting at the top, we've talked about the 3 types of people, understanding what the dark side is, some stereotypes in business, especially when it comes to women. I know I've said this about myself. I'm going to be honest. I've said this about other people. I know firsthand it's been said about me. The stereotypes help bring awareness. That's why I wanted to talk about it. But then understanding the zone, how we're going to get into the zone, what it is that puts you into the zone. And a lot of times it's something triggered on your dark side. Now, let's get to these tips and kind of wrap this up here, because there's some practical tips that I wanted to offer for harnessing your dark side. And I'm going to share a little bit more from the book here in a second, because there are some great things. Again, I cannot say it enough. Read this book. But self-awareness and acceptance. So I would encourage all of you listening in right now is to recognize and accept your dark side. Like I said earlier, Tim says it in the book, we all have one. And here's a point right now. If you've ever questioned, oh no, Shelly, I don't have a dark side. Here's what Tim says. Anytime you've had an internal struggle over what you want versus what you know is right, that's your dark side you're wrestling with. So think back to those times. Like, where have I struggled with what I want versus what you know is right? Okay. It doesn't mean that what you want is wrong. It just may not be what society or social media or your boss, who might be a bad boss, right, is telling you that you shouldn't do, or what is right is wrong, or right or wrong. And I shared this earlier. I was changed. It was like my dark side was scary to them, because I know in my pharmaceutical days, I can remember this was back in like 04 to, I would say probably 08, is like I was chastised often because of how direct I was. And this was with executives, because I needed tools to be able to do my job better in the field. And I would ask them for it. And instead of dancing around what it was, I would deliver it very directly, which they were not accustomed to coming from, I will say it, not even just a salesperson at the time. I was very young, but also a woman. So having both of that, young woman, who are you to tell me what I want? And so I had to learn how to get what I want. And I was, had a strong filter put on me. And that changed who I was. I was struggling with what I wanted versus what they told me what was right, 100%. So one thing that you can do is, recognize and accept it. So recognize, ask yourself that question that I read from Tim. Reflect on moments when you felt unstoppable. What was it that drove you during those times? What was the trigger? Did you have a trigger? I talked about the chip on my shoulder. And I'll share more. I can share so many stories about that. I just used it this past weekend competing with my horse. So I know what my trigger is, and I harness that often because it puts me in a significant focused zone. Now, one thing that I always did, and I'll just share this, the chip on my shoulder, but when someone tells me that something cannot be done, for example, being top 20 in the world in the horse competition that I do, with only one horse competing, this was based upon money earnings, everyone told me it couldn't be done. Well, I did it in 2020. I was actually ninth. Winning back-to-back years when I was in pharmaceutical sales. Again, this was like back in 2004, back-to-back years. Everyone's like, you can't do that. You can't win back-to-back years because they reset your quotas and they mess it up. I remember looking at them silently saying I can remember the person that told me. He at the time had 20 years in the business and he's telling me I can't be done. And I'm like, and he's very well respected. And I looked at him and I just smiled. And in my head, I was like, watch me. And guess what I did? I think I had 4 or 5 years back to back winning everything. Someone telling me, you can't open a restaurant. You've never opened a restaurant. Watch me. Like it was just that puts me right into the zone, extreme focus and execution on action. So those are the things that were my triggers that showed me how to get into the zone. Now, the second thing that you can do, so the first one, self-awareness and acceptance. The second thing is setting ruthless goals. So it's not, you heard that word ruthless. I don't mean like, oh, I'm going to hit this or I'm going to hit that. Chris and I, for our company, we have a floor goal. Like this is the goal that we feel very confident that we can hit. It's going to be a push, but we can hit it. We also have a crazy F yeah. We call it our F yeah goal. And that's like, okay, I don't know where this is going to come from just yet, but we are going to make the connections and we have this F yeah goal, this big goal. When you set those larger than life goals that you cannot believe, yet when you set them, it completely changes the way that you think and problem solve. If you're at a certain level, you will reach your level. Go above that, your brain has to comprehend and process information differently. And I actually looked up someone that most people know, Sarah Blakely. She just launched a new business, but she also created, she founded Spanx, sold it, I forget, over $1 billion. But she set a goal back when she started Spanx, to a bold goal to create a $1 billion company despite all the rejections. If you go back to Sarah Blakely in the beginning, she was told no by everybody, but she had an unwavering commitment and she had a clear vision. And I guarantee you she had a dark side, everyone telling her no, she couldn't do it. And all of that helped her achieve her goal. She did sell Spanx for $1 billion. And I just love that there is proof out there of other people, specifically even women, that have done this. And what you can do with those big goals is start breaking them down into actionable steps. And know, one thing that I always ask when it comes to goals for me, everyone's like, what do I have to do for me? One tool that helps me, and I literally just used it yesterday, Chris and I were talking about it, was what am I going to have to sacrifice? Because this goal is so big, and I know that I can take all these actions to get there, but I don't know, these things will lead there. Proof from my past has shown that, but I also know that this is a new level. So what do I have to sacrifice? Because I think a lot of our ability to get goals is not what we'll do, but what we're willing to sacrifice. Is that time, commitment, money, lifestyle? What is it? And then the third thing is just channeling that intensity and focus. And I want to come back to the book real quick. And what Tim shares here is when it comes to intensity and focus, that's what the dark side does. It shuts down the laws of right and wrong and allows you to discover what you are really made of, what you're capable of doing. When you get into the zone and you channel that dark side, your intensity and focus automatically increase. And you will be surprised to see what you are capable of when you truly leverage it and understand it. Now, when it comes to channeling and focus, I got to tell you, I keep bringing it back to the word no. All the time, we are offered opportunities. And when that focus for me, when it comes to our business, I have a clear barometer. We get offered an opportunity of various types. I look at it and I go, is this help Brian contracting or not? If it does, the answer is yes. 99% of the time, this does not help it. This will be a distraction. The answer is no. And I move on. It is a quick, there's zero emotion with it. And I stay focused and determined in what we are going to achieve. Notice how I changed those words there? So coming back to all of this is that in this book, Tim goes on to say, right, you might be a cooler, you might be a closer, you might be a cleaner. Everyone's going to think that they're cleaners right off the bat. But through various periods of your life, you can change. And so if you're like, wow, I do have to take a lot of direction, I do need to be motivated, okay, that's fine. And if that's where you want to stay, again, that's fine. Maybe this podcast, this episode, this podcast, maybe I'm not for you. But if you are wanting to get better, if you are wanting to increase your mindset, if you are wanting to kind of go in places that most people don't go, to their dark side for a source of energy, focus, and clarity, know that you can move through those types of people. You can become that closer. You can then become that cleaner. And so the actionable takeaways for you to be able to do all of this again is just embrace that dark side. Reflect on it. Accept your dark side. Identify how it can be your source of strength. What are your triggers there? Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's just writing it down. Maybe it's just like a quick reflection once a month and going. You want to make sure that you always set high, uncompromising goals. Write down these goals. We have a floor goal and we have an F yeah goal, a huge goal, a big goal, whatever you want to name it. That's how we look at it, right? We like to keep it fun. Set those big F yeah goals and then commit to achieving them without excuses. And then the last one is honestly, be who you really are. Own it. And I'm going to bring you back to this first question, because I think this is the first step in really learning and understanding your dark side and being able to use it. And this should trigger points in your life. It could have been when you were a child. It could have been when you were in college. It could be with an old relationship, a different job, whatever. But anytime you've had an internal struggle over what you want versus what you know is, quote, right, that's your dark side you're wrestling with. That's the moment I want you to stop and be like, wait a minute. Maybe I should lean into that dark side, and it will push me to levels I never thought were possible. This was a long one, guys. I'm so glad that you stuck with me to the end, a long solo one. But if this hit home, first off, read the dang book. I will have a link down in my bio in the notes. I do not receive any money off of this. I'm just putting this out here to help you. And then don't forget to help me back. Share this out. Share this out with your friends. Share this podcast out. And don't forget to leave that quick 5-10-second review. Hit 5 stars, leave a sentence. Helps get the show out to more and more. And let's stay connected on socials. Don't forget, keep taking more action.